We're back with Erica-Lynn Huberty, one of the TAKEOVER 2020 artists in residence. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about your focus on women's work.
Okay, so women's work I think of a lot as I'm actually doing my work, and it forms a real psychological and emotional basis for my work. And women's work would be what people would have traditionally thought of as only work for women. That often included needlework. And historically, there would have been two kinds of needlework: plain work and fancy work. Plain work would have been done by, let's say, an unmarried woman, or who had to support children, or her family, and she would have just been making other people's clothing, curtains, draperies, linens, and she would be hired. That would be like hired work. And then fancy work would be all the sort of stuff that you see here, like crewel work and French knots and all of these really tricky techniques of decoration. And you were sort of allowed to engage in that if you were in the upper classes, if you were married, because the thought behind that being, again, telling women what they can and can't do, what they should and shouldn't do, depending on their social economic status. And of course, there were no hard and fast rules. People engaged in all kinds of needlework behind closed doors. In fact, there were sewing circles where women could sort of get together and actually talk openly amongst each other while doing something, quote, as harmless as sewing. But I'm also really fascinated with this idea because over the last 2 decades or so, our own economic and social system has become so split between the rich and the poor, and we actually haven't seen the difference in economic status since the 1800s. And we're sort of exactly right back economically where we were in the robber baron era and before that, and in the whaling era out here. So that's a frightening thought to me, and it's also very interesting to me to be able to make a comment on that just by choosing to do certain stitching at certain times on the pieces, depending on what that means to me in the moment. It's almost like coding. And in fact, there's also a whole history of women being hired to do coding and knitting and embroidery during the Civil War, earlier than that even, certainly among Native peoples, where you have either in India on the Asian continent or here in North America, certain stitches actually telling stories and meaning things. And there was a slew of women who would knit during World War II and actually drop in and add stitches to make Morse code in scarves that they would hand to soldiers. So, so all of this is both fascinating to me, and it's also really empowering because it means that I can engage in these handicrafts and these techniques that normally someone would say, oh, that's something a housewife would do, or that's something, like only girls do, when in fact there's actually great power behind all of those techniques and using them.
I see this quote here.
Yes, but for the needle would we trespass through the veil of ill repute. And this piece was made specifically for an exhibit at the Sag Harbor Whaling Museum about the history of Sag Harbor as a place. And this is called Women's Work, this tapestry. And it was about the 2 options open to women living in Sag Harbor during the whaling industry. If you were unmarried, your basic jobs would be working in a brothel, which there were several, especially down by Long Wharf, or sewing. And that's how you could support yourself, your family. If you had a husband even that went off and died at sea, you were left with your kids. There weren't too many options open for you. So the idea is that if you had this skill and you could use it, and you had the money to at least have a needle or could carve one from whalebone, then you could employ yourself in something that didn't involve selling your body. And that's like a really stark reality. And that was a stark reality for women who lived here in that time period.
Oh, thank you. So this has been Erica-Lynn Huberty, again, one of our TAKEOVER 2020 artists. We'll do a little scan through your space so they can see everything. Thank you, Erica. And again, these works are for sale. If you're interested in purchasing any of Erica's work or anyone else's in TAKEOVER 2020, email us at info@southamptoncenter.org. Again, that's info@southamptoncenter.org. And keep checking YouTube for our uploaded content about this exhibition and other things related to Southampton Art Center. Thank you, Erica.